All right. Well, welcome to our leadership series. My name is Dana Williams, and I'm with my two buds, H and Micah. We've been together for a while. We started on Clubhouse and then migrated over here to LinkedIn. Today's topic is about great questions that leaders ask. And the reason that we're here is we want to help just share tips and tools that we've learned. We're all Clifton Strengths coaches, and we work as consultants and coaches in corporate America. And we are seeing a lot right now and just want to share and have a great discussion. So we're glad you're here. I'm going to pass it over to H, and then he's going to pass it over to Micah, who's going to actually be our facilitator today. We want to encourage you, just write comments or questions. And while we can't respond back to you with typed comments, we will respond with oral comments. So please send us questions throughout our time together today. So I'm going to hand the mic over to H to introduce himself, and then to Micah, our facilitator.
Thanks, Dana. I'm H. That's what everybody calls me. It's my first initial. I've been on my own about 10 years. I do mostly facilitation with leadership teams around leadership development, organizational development, and I also do strategy and brand facilitation. So that's a little about me. Micah.
All right. Thank you, H. My name is Micah Lawrence. I'm an ICF certified coach, a Gallup certified strengths coach, and a trained facilitator. And I, like H, do a lot of facilitation, but I work mostly with small businesses and startups. I love doing leadership coaching with founders and CEOs, and also do a lot of development workshops with their leadership teams. So today, just to reiterate what Dana said, we have access to the comments for anybody who's joining us for the first time and you want to ask us a question or provide some input as you're listening to us talk. We would love to see what you have to share, and we will also respond to it, not through text, but verbally as we see questions. So please feel free to input anything there that comes to mind. Now, today we talked about, or the topic that we are going to talk about, is how the questions that great leaders ask. And it's funny that we often prepare for these LinkedIn Lives independently, and then we come together and we just share what we've researched and from our own experience what we've learned. And right before we started the LinkedIn Live, we started having this conversation about questions and asking good questions from a coaching perspective, how it's really a two-sided coin. You cannot ask good questions if you are not a focused, active listener. And so we want to talk a little bit about how those are two sides of the same coin. It is so critical to be able to ask good questions, but if you're not listening, you're going to miss those opportunities to ask powerful questions. So while coaching as a leader is broader than just listening and asking questions, that's what we're going to focus on today. So one of the things that came to mind for me is that powerful questions is really what you're going for. What are the questions that evoke change in the people that you're leading? And yet powerful questions can be different in different circumstances. What works in one situation with one of your people, a very powerful question that just seems to land beautifully, may not work next time, even with the same person or with different people. And so active listening is a critical part of being able to ask good questions. And so just real quick, I want to cover a couple of reminders about active listening, and then a couple of reminders about good question asking. And then I'm going to kind of open it up to Dana and H to just have more of an organic conversation, sharing some thoughts about both listening and asking good questions. So a couple of things to remember about active listening. One thing is that it's hard. This is hard to do, and everybody knows that this is a part of active listening, but we should not be listening with the idea of what we're about to say on our tongue, thinking about what am I going to say in response to this person's comments. And that is probably one of the hardest habits to rid yourself of, is to think about what is my response going to be, because then you can be fully present as you listen. Another thing to keep in mind is that we should be doing our best as active listeners to withhold judgment. Sometimes it is easy to think about, like, this thing that somebody is saying is not something that I would do or doesn't align with my values, and that's not helpful to them. We need to withhold judgment and not bring ourselves into the conversation. We're really just listening, and whatever comes out of their mouth, albeit if it's illegal, then something's got to be done. We got to say something.
Yeah.
But withholding judgment in general. A couple other little things that we can do is just active listening tips, like reflecting back to them words that they use. And so they can hear in their own ears the words that are coming out of their mouth. That's a helpful tip, because then they feel heard. You're reflecting back to them something that they said and they feel more heard. And then taking time to clarify your understanding and sometimes even summarizing what you think you heard is a great way to make sure that you're not making assumptions about what you're hearing from the people that you're leading and coaching. So I'll stop there with listening and provide a couple of thoughts on questioning. And I'm sure some of these things will come back in as we keep talking. But when it comes to questioning, I would say the most important thing to keep in mind that I think kind of applies to both sides, the listening and the questioning, but it's coming from a place of curiosity, not with the intent to advise, which can be really difficult for leaders who have a lot of experience in their field, who have become experts at what they're knowledgeable about. And to know that you have an opinion and you have advice can be so hard to withhold, and instead just put that on the back burner, set that aside, and come with curiosity. Try to understand the person that you're talking to and engaging with. And through that kind of curious listening, it will naturally translate to curious questioning. When you're really coming from a place of curiosity, you'll ask questions like, oh, what made you feel that way? Or what have you tried that's worked? And all of a sudden your curiosity is leading a natural flow of the kinds of questions that would come based on the information that you're hearing. A couple last quick things on questions. When you ask questions to the extent that they're open-ended, not closed-ended questions like yes or no, but open-ended questions, allow the people that you're coaching to take the conversation where they need it to go. And that is probably one of the most beneficial things to do in a coaching leadership relationship, is to let them drive. When you're tempted by giving advice, all of a sudden your opinion and your path forward is what you're encouraging them to take, and that may not be right for them. So I'll pause there. A lot of what I just shared, these are things that are very much ICF certified coaching traits and principles that as a leader, you can adopt these things and see it in your leadership style and be connecting with your people better, allowing them to see growth in their professional development and in their performance. So I'll pause there. Dana, I know that some people were asking about audio. Is that something we need to
I think the
fix real quick?
audio is, I think they hear us now. I think there was a few people
Okay.
that welcome John and Adele. We're glad you're here. It sounds like you guys have the audio now. So yes, I think we're good. Micah, I love the fact that we all got excited about talking about listening. That is the hardest thing, whether you're a leader or a spouse or a friend, parent, listening. And I saw a great example of listening. I was in Marfa, Texas at a wedding a couple weeks ago, and there was a stop sign, and somebody had beautifully written under stop and listen. And they wrote listen. And I took a picture of it. I'll have to post it. But
great.
it's just, and you think about it, I was with my daughter and her littles this weekend. My son-in-law ran a marathon, and everybody's always on their phones, right? You've got kids, and it's hard and grandkids. It's hard when everybody's not looking. And as a leader, I see a lot of leaders doing that. And so that's taking that time just to look. And I've even seen leaders put the phone down, put it in a drawer, do something to say, I'm not going to look at my phone while I'm talking to you. I've heard other cases of great leaders that tend to do that in meetings, and I don't think they realize they're doing that. Yeah. So I think it's that
eye contact, something as simple as eye contact is really
the
impactful.
Eye contact is huge. And it's whether it's with, like I said, whoever you're with. But the story from yesterday, the marathon story, is my son didn't really get to train much. But at the end of the race, he came to us afterwards. He said, "You're not going to believe who was here." And I said, "Who?" And he said, "My leader." And I was thinking to myself,
no way.
Spencer's not one to talk about himself or what he's doing. His leader must have asked him, "Hey, what have you got going on?" And he made a point to be there. And
That's
there's a
cool.
picture of them shaking hands. Spencer didn't talk about how hard the hill was or hydrating. He talked about the fact that his leader was at the end of the race. And I think
That's
it's those
cool.
moments and
Very
those
cool.
experiences and those emotional times in our life that our leader asked the question, we were there. So listening is huge. So I'm so glad we started with listening, and then keeping that eye contact and making sure people know you're paying attention and that you're all the things you just mentioned. I think the other big thing with listening is making the silence count. So sometimes when we ask a question and the receiver isn't answering us right away, we tend to want to fill in that space. And I'm guilty of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I heard from my friend Bob Titi is to the 8-second rule. It takes 8 seconds to fall off a bull. What can we do for 8 seconds? And he says the longer the silence, the better the answer. So
Yeah.
I thought that was a great tip in
That's powerful.
listening. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure, I'm so glad you brought that up. And as far as questions go, I think being able to ask questions, and like you said, they're going to be different. You might ask the same person the same question in a different way, a different time, and their
Yeah.
answer is going to be different because we all are growing every day and we're organic beings, and we're not going to be the same we were today as we were yesterday. So there's 4 questions. I have a coaching group, and there's 4 questions I ask them every month. And I've seen different answers every month, but I've seen some really powerful answers. And the 4 questions are: what's going well? Start with something positive. And these came from Bob. What's not going well? What's stuck? And then what's needed to change? So they're
Yeah.
broad, they're not real specific, but the answers that come back from these questions are amazing, and we're
Yeah.
able to help address those. So I just thought those were great questions, and I love
I
using
love
them.
those.
And I'm going to start using them on my husband too. So there you go.
Nice.
Okay,
Nice.
H, tell us what's on your mind as you think about this.
I'm going to build on what you said. I love starting with the positive, and there's a reason why we do that. You start with the positive so that so it reinforces the confidence of the person who's talking about their positive, so that we can take on what is hard. And that's one of the reasons we always start with positive. Just to go back to what you were talking, just touch on listening. And one of the things that I do when I'm coaching someone, you want to set yourself up as the leader, right? As the coach, to listen for 3 things. And so I always have that on my mind when I'm listening to someone. One, I listen for facts and information. What do they tell? What are they literally saying? What is that?
Yeah.
I want to listen for feelings. How do they feel
Yep.
about it? What's the emotion? And then the last one, I want to listen for values. What is this person? So one, understand the feeling, because if we're going to move forward, right, whatever this coaching call is, and Micah, you said it, I think you said it well. It's a lot of coaching is about change and changing behavior. So if someone can't change if they're emotional, right? We've got to work through that emotion, and also tethering the change or the conversation to the value of what they believe in. So I think that can be a consistent thing that you want to come back to and reiterate. So that, I think, knowing that onus is on you as the leader to do those 3 things does a couple things. It focuses my attention. And it makes me think about it. My energy is now invested in, I've got to figure out these 3 things. So I'm less likely to think about, to do the judging, to do the projection, and all of that. So, yeah.
Can I share a quick experience, H, that just those 3 examples that you gave: listening for facts, listening for emotions, and listening for, what was the third?
Values.
I love that.
What's their value?
So I was coaching a leader recently, and we were going through a scenario where he said that he had an employee that was working for him that came to him saying that he had a change in budget. There was a change in budget with their client that he was working with, and this employee overreacted, according to the manager. Like, it was a bigger deal to the employee than it was to the manager. And so the leader said, the employee came to him and was like, well, I'm worried that this change happened in our budget and timeline. And the leader jumped straight to to making assumptions and drawing conclusions and said, don't worry about it. I'm not worried about it. Things like that happen all the time. And it came from a good place where the leader was like trying to help them calm down. They're like, hey, it's not a big deal. This happens all the time. And I said, when they use the word worried or fear or concerned, that's when my red flags pop up. And I write those words down, because when it's my turn to ask a question, that's the first place I go. What are you worried about? And I asked him, what was your employee worried about? And he thought for a second, was like, I have no idea. It's like that's where we dig. That's where coaching happens. When you pause and you don't assume that oh, they're worried about I don't know what I'm going to think about their client, or they're worried about the client's perception on them. Those are all assumptions. Until you ask your people, why are you afraid? Why are you worried? Then all of a sudden things come out like, well, I thought that if I did this too many times, I would lose my job. That's a worry that is rooted in something deeper than what you're seeing on the surface. And you can address that thing because you asked that extra question. What are you worried about? So I love H. That's just a recent example of a leader that I think that clicked for them, that they missed that trigger question or that trigger word, I'm worried, to be able to dig a little bit deeper and get value out of it.
And to build on that, Mike, I think too often as leader, we think our role is to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And you cannot, it is not, the role of coach is to get them to solve their own problem. The thing about it is, you can't solve the problem. They're not capable of solving the problem, or they're less likely to commit to a solution or develop their own solution until they resolve the emotion.
And I'm glad you brought that emotion, because I think I saw recently that, is it Duke said that 45% of people's behaviors are automatic. They don't really think about them. They just react. And there comes in the emotion and all the things that you're talking about. And it's like, as a leader, it's learning to just kind of step back. I know we've talked a lot in between time about emotional intelligence, but being able to take that inner self and say, what am I responding to? And not be automatic, but be more intentional as a leader. And I think that goes with the listening. It goes with the,
for sure,
looking at the, eye contact.
That's interesting. That's interesting to hear the research too. And that it didn't come from H this time, because it's usually H that's here's all my research that I found. So one of the things that just struck me as like actual practical questions that leaders who are just exploring the coaching side of leadership for the first time, here are two questions that I think have served me really well. And they go right back to what H was saying, that it is not your job to solve their problem. It is your job to coach them through solving their own problem. And two questions that I like to use back to back with people is, when they've come with a problem, they are stuck in some way or another, is first I'll ask, what have you tried already? And that gives them an opportunity to reflect back on what they've done and what's worked or what hasn't. And then I follow up with the question, what haven't you tried? Then all of a sudden it opens up all of this possibility for them to think, these are my options. And it's not you outlining the options, it's giving them an opportunity to outline the options for themselves. Well, I haven't tried this, I haven't tried this, I haven't tried this. And that leads to natural conversations beyond that. But that pair, that duo of what have you tried and what haven't you tried, seems to be a really powerful combination. I don't know if either of you, do you have any like in your back pocket questions that are your go-to questions that you feel like always evoke a response that's especially effective in a coaching situation?
I think the four that I mentioned earlier in the call, and then I think my biggest one is, what's on your mind right now? Because people will always, when you ask that question, they'll always tell you. It might be something totally different from what the subject of context of what you thought you were going to be talking about. It might be, the person you're working with, kids are sick, or, something that's on their mind. But I think that one is so powerful.
I love that.
Yeah.
I have a similar one that I'll ask, what conclusions have you drawn up to this point in our conversation? And I can do that at different spaces, like halfway through I'll ask, and then at the end, like we're getting close to the end of time, what conclusions have you drawn up to this point that maybe we haven't even talked about? And it opens up a similar you don't always realize that there's more going on in their head that's not coming out of their mouth. I love that, Dana.
And they don't realize it either because it's it's automatic, right? It's coming out.
Yeah, what's crazy is how often it surprises me. The conclusion
Yeah.
they draw. I'm like, whoa, that's cool. I'm really glad you told me that.
Yeah.
H, what about you?
I tend to go, I tend to talk about what have you learned since we last met, or what is something you're really excited about that you've tried recently. So I want to promote the learning, and this is the next. We'll talk in January about coaching for development, and get more into that. But I find that it goes back to this. I want to start off with that, so they're internalizing what they've done, which gives them more confidence, so that they feel confident enough to take on where the more difficult stuff, where they might be stuck, or where they do have a concern or the worry.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, to me, it's that, call it reflective development in the moment.
And sometimes
like
even
that.
asking, what is the outcome you would like to have by the end of our time today? Kind of what is that outcome? I do that with the strengths journal. Just what is your outcome for the end of the day? But meeting with others, leaders, asking what is the outcome you want, and just focusing everything towards that. That's helpful.
Beautiful.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I'll bring this up because I do find, I think to get to that outcome question, I've got to understand their frame of mind. And I'll give you my one of my favorite coaching examples. So I've been working out and in gyms since I was 4 years old. I'm the son of a coach, right? I've had trainers, off and on my whole life. And as someone who does training, I'm kind of picky. I'm hard, and
it sounded like a derogatory term. You son of a coach. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
No, I love sports and I love
We
football.
keep learning more about you, Age.
Yeah.
Right?
So so when it comes to picking a trainer, right? The trainer that comes that always, if I'm at a gym, or when I was at a gym and a trainer would say, well, what's your goal today? What do you want? What are you working on? What outcome do you want to get? And I just go, you're not, no, move on. So the trainer I've had for the last 10 years, how he starts and I go see him every week. We do a lot of core and Pilates anyway. And Shane's like, he trained in the baseball. He trained Major League Baseball teams before he started his own thing. You know what Shane asks me every day when I show up? How do you feel? How do you feel?
How do you feel?
How's your body feel? Because that is going to predict what I'm able to do. Because what he's getting at, because it may be, I'm old. My body, I've got aches, I've got pains. I may have been traveling, which I did recently, and my body's just like, I might be hungover. Who knows? Knowing how I feel is going to set the stage for our engagement. And I think that I love that. And when he first did, I was like, oh, yeah, he gets it. He gets
He's
me.
Good. He's good.
Look, there are other people that, I was with friends yesterday and they're younger and they're all into CrossFit. And it's actually, it was 5 gal pals of mine. And they're all talking about, oh yeah, yesterday I did, 35-pound double dumbbells, lifts, and I'm going, and I was just like, no, I'm at a different space. I'm not looking at the goal. I don't have, measure. I don't keep track of what I'm doing. So, but I think that's just an interesting way to look at, you have to tailor the call. And I think that opening question is so critical to say, what is it that works for this person?
You just touched on something that I've struggled with since my very first coaching course. So it was probably, maybe not my very first coaching course, because I did my Clifton Strengths coaching courses back in 2019. But last October, I signed up for a 6-month coaching program that was ICF accredited. And the first class, they talked about how important it is to do what Dana said, is you start the conversation by creating an agreement with the person that you're interacting with and ask them, what outcome would you like to see by the end of our time? And I've struggled with that question and have tried every which way of altering it to make it more impactful for people, because people don't think in outcomes or results. It's so hard to get them from here to there. So anytime I did use that, especially at the beginning, because that's what I was taught, I'd be like, well, what outcome do you want to achieve? They were scratching their head like, what do you mean? What do you
So,
mean? What outcome is
yeah.
possible by the end of this conversation? So I want to give you a second too, but this is like a month ago, I finally settled on the question that I like most of all of the ones that I've tried. And it's because we only have an hour. The question is, what do you want to do, think, know, or feel by the end of our time? It's getting to the feelings. What do you want to know? I've summarized it into know and feel, but I think there's some do in there too. But what do you want to know or feel by the end of our time here? That's something that people can kind of translate into, well, I want to have some ideas about how I'm going to get back into shape. It's like, cool, we can work toward that. H, what were you thinking?
I had one thing I was and this is a quote from CCL, Center for Creative Leadership, that results move at the speed of relationship or speed of trust, right?
Cool.
So to talk about what the outcome is depends on what their trust level is with me. And that trust level may be dependent on what they want to talk about. So I think that's, each time I still want to know,
So true.
And I love the questions you just asked that question, because Micah, what I would tell you, I use an instrument called emergenetics, which is it's the 4 different thinking profiles. And what you just did is what I call take a whole brained approach. Think, do, know, feel.
Cool.
So, right. Those are analytical thinking is all about the knowing. Social thinking is all about the feeling. Structural thinking is all about the doing. Conceptual thinking is all about the whatever the 4th one was. So you just took a whole brained approach, which can appeal to.
I should have talked to you about this months ago.
You would have been so much happier, right?
What was I waiting
I don't know if
for?
I'd have put it together then. I've never thought about using that as a coaching construct. And I think that's one of the things that's helpful is, and what we've kind of talked about, you have to be able to put a construct together for every conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're saying. There is no, hey, ask these 5 questions every time you coach.
No.
It doesn't exist.
And I think, and I think we have individualization. I think at least 2 of us, I don't know if all 3 of us have it, but
number 11 for me.
Okay, there we go.
I'll take it.
Yeah. And it's number 5 for me. So it's definitely customizing. I do not do every conversation is unique. Every opportunity is unique. And I love what y'all were talking about. How are you feeling? Like whether it be the coach at the gym or you as a coach, Micah, as a career coach or just as a strengths coach. But I think one of the things is stopping, even right now, if we know 7 out of 10 people are suffering, right? So how do we, one of the questions I've asked, even with groups, is how are you doing? How are you doing right now?
Yeah.
And it's kind of that, how are you feeling? But in a way of like, well, how are you doing? And it is different every moment of every day. There's 20,000 moments in a day, and there's a different moment that we're going to be doing differently depending. So being able to ask that question and pull that out of somebody, I think is pretty powerful.
Yeah. Well, and it also creates, go ahead, H.
Well, I was just going to say, sometimes if, how are you feeling is too touchy-feely.
Yeah.
This book called The Coaching Habit that, Mike and I have talked about it.
Yeah.
The kickstart question is what's on your mind, which may be a safer way to approach that. And then I think they always say it's the awe question, AWE. And then you ask, and what else? That's what awe stands for. And I think that's a good, right. So that especially if you're listening for beyond facts to emotion and value or feelings and value, and there's some underlying feeling, and what else is a great way to start peeling back that onion
let them go deeper by choice, not
100%.
because you're prying, right?
Yes.
I think the feeling side of this is the fact that we're talking about outcomes, going back to the what outcome would you like to see by the end of this conversation? I don't think people often associate feelings with outcomes. Like, well, if I'm being honest, I just want to feel better by the end of our conversation. It's like, great, feel better about what? It's like feeling better is an outcome that I don't think they feel permission to get to if you don't make that apparent for them. Like just leaving this conversation, feeling better about your path forward or feeling better about yourself or your past decisions, all of that's on the table. And that's an okay outcome for a coaching conversation.
Every time I do team development sessions, I always propose doing an exercise I call climate control, which is essentially, how is the team feeling? Because I just did it with a team because it's so telling, and you give them the construct. So I've got a list of like 20 different emotions. And by the way, those emotions are divided into 4 categories and there's levels, right? So I know if a team is feeling is feeling confident, that's a higher level versus motivated, versus I can't remember what the third one was, right? So that tells me where they are. Because the thing is, if we're working on the team development, we want to come back and say, have we enhanced the positive emotion? Let's say motivated. Have we moved the needle on that? Have we addressed the team I just worked with was feeling overwhelmed and tired? If you don't address that, you're not going to continue getting the results, the outcomes we want. And I think that's true too. So one is having that construct, right? That's why it's so important to listen to the feelings and play that back. Say, hey, what I'm hearing from you is this particular feeling, right? So that you can address that. So because we don't get to outcomes and the results unless we do process that emotion as a team and or individual.
Yeah, we can't ignore that.
I like doing the check-in, check-out. So check in with the team. How's everybody doing? Here's our agenda. Here's what we've got. Is there anything else? And then check out. Now, here's what y'all said at the beginning you wanted. Is this what you've got? Do we achieve, to your point, H, did we answer your questions on how everybody's feeling or how overwhelmed you're doing? What are some things we can do as we check out right now? So giving yourself that grace at the beginning of the meeting, at the end of the meeting, to kind of talk about that.
I love that.
Yeah, that kind of helps. And it's a quick, I started doing it a couple of years ago. And then my boss like, check in, Dana, check in, check out. I'm like, okay. So
you trained them well. That's good.
Yeah, they're still doing it, I think.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're getting close on the amount of time that we wanted to spend today, but I did want to acknowledge a couple of things. So I noticed one person made a comment in the comments or in the chat saying that they love that iOS for iPhones just came out with this focus mode, and that allows you to just say nothing distracts me, so that I can be present with the person that I'm coaching and not have any distractions. I think that's awesome. What a great example of creating the environment where you can be at your best and lean into your strengths and your desires to be a better leader. Why don't we take, here's a couple questions came through here. Questions that they like. What is your gut saying to you? Is another question that they like to use. That's a good one. That gives people space to kind of go with what's comfortable to them, even if they can't explain why.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I think the other one that came up when I was just looking at that was asking, and I do this on the podcast too. Is there anything I didn't ask you that's on your mind that you want to share with me? And it's amazing.
I like that.
It's amazing what comes out, because there's always something on their mind and then when you ask them that question, it like opens up amazing dialogue of something else that they didn't get to share that they want to share. So you're giving them that permission.
Cool. Yeah. Well, then let's end with that then for you, Dana and H. It's like, what's something that you haven't shared yet that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I'll share, Gallup had published 5 questions to ask your employees, especially in this time of the Great Resignation, which I think is now transitioned to the Great Migration. And I thought these were 5 powerful questions, and we can post them on the website too. But 1, what do you look forward to at work each day? 2, what are you learning? What do you want to learn? 3, and I think the 3 and 4 are something that I think are really powerful. 3, why are you staying? 4, when was the last time you thought about leaving and why? And 5, what can I do to make your job better? I just think those are really relevant and and that to me leads to a powerful conversation, especially if you've got retention risk.
Yeah. A couple of those too would take a confident leader that's willing to get vulnerable to ask those questions.
Yep.
I think
Dana, what about you?
Yeah, the only thing on my mind right now is asking yourself these questions. So many times we come up with these great questions and we're asking everybody else, but we're not doing that self-check as a leader of, well, what do I need? And having that quiet time to kind of just process So the questions that you just went through, some of the other ones we talked about, what's going well, what's not, what's stuck, what's needed to change. Sometimes we're just so used to getting those from outside, and sometimes just asking ourselves those questions, I think, is pretty
I
powerful.
love that. What a great reminder.
Yeah.
The last thing I would add then is, just as we've had this conversation, and I mentioned this before, but I would just reiterate the power of being intentionally curious, both in your active listening and in your question asking. And this is something that if you're not used to this, will take some practice. And fortunately, it's something you can practice. Curious listening and curious question asking is a term I use, discovery, as the term for both of these things at the same time. I do it all the time. If I'm engaging with somebody who I'm just meeting for the first time, I practice curiosity with them. Like, I'm basically gonna shut up, and I'm gonna get this person to keep talking to me by asking really good questions. And so, and I'm a talker. I really like to talk, but when I do this intentionally, I can get into this mode where it's like I'm listening so intently that eventually my curiosity isn't feigned. It is genuine. They get to a point where they'll bring up, well, and I'm working on this thing. You don't want to know about that. It's like, well, tell me more about it. And it's like, well, I'm a rocket scientist and I'm working on, it's like, what? Tell me more about that. And eventually it's like, I can't get enough out of them. And it's true, genuine curiosity that with practice can become so natural that all of a sudden asking great, powerful questions doesn't take any effort at all, because your curiosity is leading the way. And then all of a sudden your coaching takes over as well, and you lead people to the solutions that they're looking for. So just something I would encourage you to do is practice curiosity in your daily life, even with people you aren't coaching. All right, Dana, what do we have?
I love that.
January. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we have January 10th, and H is going to be our facilitator. Today, we've talked about coaching for performance and asking the right questions, and great questions that leaders ask. Next time, we're going to be talking about coaching for development. So H, do you want to give a kind of a sneak peek of what you're going to be leading us in?
Yeah, I think, it's usually at the start of the year is when we think about development, especially if you work for a company, right? There's formal development. So I think as leaders, it's really, how do we have those conversations with our people so that they're looking forward and that they're going to commit and invest in their own development. So we'll talk about that. And there's some different constructs and tools that we'll use. Because it's just about asking questions, but I think it's a little different conversation, right?
Yeah, agreed.
I love that. And that is the time everybody's going to be working on their individual performance plans and helping have those conversations. And so, and we've been talking as a group about attracting and retaining and developing our employees. So as we continue to bring tools in on leadership, I'm excited to hear that, H. And that's great. And I think, Micah, you noted the fact that we would put on the website. So we do have dominateyourday.club, and we will put all of our content on there, what we shared today. And also this recording stays on LinkedIn. So please share it with your coworkers and your other friends in your community. We'd love that. So, and thank you, Micah, for leading us today.
Thanks, Micah.
You bet. Yeah. Thank you guys. And thanks
Okay.
to everybody who joined us and left comments. We appreciate you being here with us.
It was great. Everybody have a great holiday. We will
Y'all
see
have a
you
good
back
day.
January 10th. All right.
Yeah. Have
Happy
good holidays.
New Year.
Thanks.